the Emerging Technologies Program, which is now called the Max Center for Technological Innovation. We're the world's leading academic center, which is studying best practices and strategies for managing innovation across industries. We'll make these slides available to you, so if you contact OMEX, you should be able to access my slides. I'm going to talk about a lot of things, and I'm not going to include all the information on my slides. So these are some of the research priorities that we focus on. We've awarded about $2 million worth of grants in the last half-decade. We fund 25 to 30 faculty projects a year. We hold 4 to 5 conferences and workshops, all focused on improving the practice of innovation. These are some easy definitions. Innovation is the implementation of an idea, discovery, or invention. The invention is the idea or discovery. The innovation is the implementation. Leonardo da Vinci was a great inventor, not a great implementer. Most of the stuff stayed in his notebooks. So radical innovation, which is sort of my area of interest and expertise, is an innovation that changes user behaviors and consumption patterns. Okay? And then nano-innovation is all of this at the nanoscale. Nanomedicine. I have a different definition of nanomedicine than most people. I think nanomedicine is basically the manipulation and control of nanoscale structures and processes to prevent, detect, diagnose, treat, and cure medical conditions across the board. So I include antivirals and gene therapy and organ regeneration and all of that, in addition to using nanoparticles to target or populate or code things. I'm quite inclusive on my definition. These are some areas where nanomedicine is making a difference. Everything from diagnostics to gene therapy, and you can read these when you look at my slides. At the Wharton School, we always talk about sense-making frameworks. When I first came to the Wharton School, I was talking to an older faculty member, and I happened to use the phrase business model. I said, "This is a great business model," and he said, "That's not a business model." So I said, "What is that?" And he said, "It's a sense-making framework." So now I always talk about sense-making frameworks. So here's one of the sense-making frameworks that everybody's kind of familiar with. It's called ambidexterity, which means you have to exploit existing opportunities. At the same time, you're exploring emerging opportunities, usually in the same organization. So in any one hospital, especially a university hospital like Temple or University of Pennsylvania, you'll have people working on all these different things, from gene therapy to stem cells to different types of devices and implants. At the same time, they're practicing traditional medicine. The problem with nanomedicine, especially, is that it's multidextrous. If you had a stem cell application tomorrow that would change the world by making it very easy to regenerate organs, and let's say the organs could grow in 2 months, and you could replace somebody's bladder or liver or extend somebody's life, you'd still have to compete with drugs, surgery, chemotherapy, radiation. My wife said to include acupuncture. All the existing traditional medicines would be resisting you. So that's what we mean by trying to create innovations in these ambidextrous or multidextrous marketplaces. So who are the nano-innovators? I'll give you a few examples of nano-innovators that jump out at me that I discovered in the course of research for my book, which will be published in early 2013 by Wiley VCH, which is located in Germany and is Wiley's scientific publishing arm. First of all, anyone can be an innovator. I'll prove it in a moment. I'm an innovator, and I started out as an English major and a journalist and wound up as a computer pioneer. Anyone can be an innovator or an innovation champion, as you know, because most of you are scientists. Here are some nano-innovators that I know personally, and that I think are really great. Chad Merkin has more than 500 patents and apps. He's the most cited chemist, and his innovations include the Verigene molecular diagnostic program and nanoing and all kinds of other things. Michal Lipson at Cornell, she started work on invisibility cloaks, experimenting with starting, stopping, and slowing and bending light. Right now, she's working on something really interesting. You've read a lot about bionic eyes and retinas and replacements. She's working on a technique to analyze and map macular degeneration, to find the blind spots in the eye, to create a very complex matrix-type lens that refocuses the light to make up for the blank spots and fills them in. And that's what's coming out of research that started out looking at how to bend light to create an invisibility cloak. Most of you know Ned Seaman. Ned Seaman, 30 years ago, was the only person in the world working on how to turn DNA molecules into structures. Today, there are more than 60 research groups in the world working on that. Dr. Han Chow started out in Philadelphia, now he's in the West Coast. He discovered a method to coax DNA molecules to unwind and flow through channels on a diagnostic chip, which is pretty interesting because DNA molecules are like 1 meter long and 2 nanometers wide. So those are just a few of the people that I know personally that are working in this space. Here's another one. This is not nanomedicine, but John Hart, in around 2000, he did a website called NanoBliss. And he started showing how you could use forests of nanotubes to create patterns. The first pattern that he created that was significant, that got a lot of attention, was Nanobama. And if you go to nanobama.com, you'll see the first picture of a world leader rendered at the nanoscale using forests of carbon nanotubes. And today, is he experimenting with nano art? And his website is called NanoBliss. By the way, on his website, he explains in great detail how to do this. So he didn't hold it to himself. So the thing is, if you look at this stuff, you know what he's working on now? He's working on a way to create the equivalent of a nanotechnology Xerox printer to print patterns on substrates using something like an inkjet printer. Inkjet printers are pretty popular, and Peter just was talking about organ regeneration. One of the leaders in that space used an HP inkjet printer to spray stem cells on scaffolds when he started out, and I'll come to that in a moment. This is probably the most glamorous scientist I know. This is Neri Oxman from MIT. She works in the media arts and sciences. She's also a physicist, and she developed something called nanoskin. One day she fell down on her bicycle and said, "How can I help my poor injured wrist?" And she said, "I have kind of a carpal tunnel thing going on there with my wrist. It's a similar symptom." She created something called carpal skin, which is a glove you wear to help heal carpal tunnel syndrome based on some patterns that she saw in nanoscale materials. This is, everybody knows about graphene. Graphene is cool, but how do you commercialize it? I mean, if you can't everybody's making graphene in little tiny pieces like this. I've seen pieces like this and like this and like this. How about graphene that can coat the surface of your table? So these guys, Dr. Charlie Johnson at the University of Pennsylvania, who's a friend of mine, and Mike Patterson, who's the CEO of Graphene Frontiers, which is a business that Dr. Johnson is working with to commercialize his technique, is focused on producing graphene in commercial scale quantities, and they've got some techniques for doing that. Nanobioimaging. Let me just say this. I have a really strong feeling about nanoscale imaging. I think it's great that we had the first scanning probe microscope in the 80s, but now we desperately need to be able to image disease processes, because we're not going to understand them until we actually start seeing what's going on. The problem is, most of these structures are smaller than visible light waves. Most of these structures can't be seen easily using existing technologies, and you kind of need to use optical technologies to view things that are suboptimal. So people are using metamaterials to create lenses to magnify this stuff and make videos. And here are some of the things that have come out of bioimaging in the last year or so. This is a mouse. This is a mouse stem cell held in place by nanowires. It's cancer stem cell, West Nile virus. We used to look at viruses as only artist renderings, and now we can actually see the viruses. But it's hard to isolate a single virus. Sometimes you have to hold it in a matrix of carbon nanotubes or graphene, where you basically put the virus into space between the solid area, and then you try to hold it there and take a picture of it. These are protein fibrils. This is the Huntington protein that destroys neurons in the brain, and they wanted to find out how it forms, so they did a time series showing how that forms. This on the right-hand side is the most detailed image of DNA that's been captured so far by anyone, and this was captured by Carl Jung and his group. And basically, you can see, if you look really close, you can see some of the channels and things that show that it's actually a double helix. And one of the things that he revealed from this imaging is that DNA folds right and left. And they're not sure what that means, but they know it really happens. Before this was actually shown by these images, it was only theorized. So if you translate this into action, which I'm at the Wharton School, so you know when I talk about nano innovation, we're talking about the implementation of ideas, discoveries, and so forth. But in the Wharton School, we add a ... and we say to create value. So how do you create value from this need in bioimaging? Well, one of the things we need to do is to create nanoscopes for the masses, not the classes. Right now, you have to be rich or a university or a corporation to own a scanning probe microscope. And you probably, unless you're pretty rich, it's hard to afford to replace the probes that keep getting broken or corrupted or worn. And most of you have to have an operator who triages the use of the nano instruments and keeps people from breaking them, and that creates a bottleneck, and I could go on and on. Now the question is it possible to create a small modular desktop nanoscope that a high school or a college can afford, that would have cartridges like an inkjet printer and a whole bunch of samples that students could study? Yeah, I know that myself, because in 1980, I walked into the office of this man, who he died last year, so this is, I'm kind of commemorating his memory. This is Jack Trammell, a 6-year survivor of Auschwitz, who joined the Army after the war, became a typewriter repairman in the Army, went to New York, opened a typewriter repair shop, got involved in the chain of office equipment and digital calculators, and wound up starting Commodore International, the home computer company. In 1980, I walked into his office. I kind of insulted him. He asked me what I knew about Commodore, and I said, I don't know a lot about Commodore, but I know that most of the people who know you seem to think you're some kind of crook. But I figure if you're not in prison, you're not a crook, you're just a shrewd businessman, and I'd like to learn to be shrewd like that. And he looked at me without blinking, and he said, And the next thing I knew, I was hired as assistant to the president. I guess it speaks to the point of, always speak truth to power. That's what I was doing. So the next thing I knew, I was in London, and our first day in London, we had a group of international managers from all over the world, and Jack stood up and he said, I want a small home computer. And they said, no, we're getting ready to compete with Apple. So we have a machine that looked just like an apple sitting on the table there. And Jack said, well, you talk about it and then I'll come back tomorrow. So he left the meeting, and 3 of us out of 25 argued strongly for the new computer. And this was my first day on the job. And pictures of me sitting at the table show me with real deep circles under my eyes from no sleep for a day and a half, and I'm sitting there groggy and I'm arguing like this with my hand up, and I'm just fighting for this damn computer that I thought was needed desperately. And when I came back, I threw a 30-page memo on Jack's desk, and I said, and I drew a big happy face with a beard and mustache on the cover. That's all the cover said, was a beard and mustache, happy face. And he said, what's this? And I said, this is everything needs to be done with a new computer. And he said, okay. So 2 days later, he came back to it on my desk, and he said, that's everything should be done with a new computer. You're in charge. I told everybody they have to clear everything through you, but it's going to be a little bit tricky because none of the people work for you. You're going to have to do it by persuasion and a little bit with my authority. So the next thing I knew, there I was, a 30-year-old sort of a product manager, product managing the first home computer, which became the first million-seller microcomputer and led to the family of computers that sold 50 million computers and got me enlisting in Wikipedia. And last week I went to Italy and helped christen a new computing museum, a video game museum, and I was like mobbed by Italians who their first computer was Commodore, and I had to sign t-shirts and autograph computers and have my picture taken, and if you go to my Facebook page you'll see tons and tons and tons of pictures of me with smiling Italians holding computers. That's just, my point is this. Anyone in this room could walk out of here, go get some money, go get some funding, go get your organization, go back to China, find somebody to say, who will help me bake the bread? That's sort of the little red hen, who will help me grow the wheat and bake the bread? Everybody said, I will. But when she said, who wants to help me eat the bread? Everybody said, I will. And she said, oh, too late. Somebody has to make the affordable desktop modular nanoscope for the masses, not the classes. That's my main message today. So here's how to scan the future. If you're not scanning the future, you need to have your portal has to be set up to funnel all the information in your space to you. I see 35,000 technology headlines every year. That's conservative, using iGoogle. iGoogle's going away. They're going to use Google Chrome, and you set the news settings to whatever categories of news you want, whatever subjects you want, and you get all this stuff funneled to your desk every day. You can see what's going on every day. Here's some examples of nano innovations. I'll go through these rather quickly. Everybody knows about gold and iron nanoparticles. This is a digestible computer in a pill from Proteus Digital Health in California. The head of that company was trying to figure out how to make a smart pill. And he needed to make it bio-friendly and bio-available. So they said, geez, it's got to pass the digestive system, it's got to have all these problems. What if we made the computer chip out of digestible components? And from that one statement, this is what came of it. This chip gets put in a pill, you swallow the pill, your grandmother or grandfather, or a sick person, or a psychotic criminal wears a wristband. The pill tells the wristband it's been taken or gives other information about what happened from the pill. It goes to the wristband, which in turn communicates wirelessly to the internet and tells the caregiver or diagnostician what happened with the pill. This is available today. It's passed through FDA. You can buy it today. You can go look up Proteus Digital Health. It's an amazingly clever bit of nano innovation. Then, of course, I already mentioned bionic eyes and that sort of thing. Nanosizing drugs, everybody here is talking about that. These are just a few that popped up to me. People are talking about curcumin. There's a poster upstairs on curcumin, nanosizing curcumin. I think I want to make sure I see that before I leave, because I flew back on the plane with the world's leading expert on curcumin, Dr. Agarwal from Texas, and he and I are going to be talking about that. And there's a lot of stuff going on with nanosizing drugs to make them soluble and bioavailable, and also able to be compartmentalized in drug delivery systems. Gene therapy. In 1996, my second year at Wharton, I was asked to write a white paper called Obstacles to Commercialization of Gene Therapy. Everything we wrote as an obstacle came true, including death of a patient in clinical trials at UPenn. Okay? Today, we can say that the first gene therapies are starting to work. they've either ameliorated or cured inherited blindness, leukemia, hemophilia B, and other diseases, and it's just starting. However, that's misleading because most of those so-called cures are targeted and limited. They're limited to the eye, for example, so they don't leak out. Yeah, 2 minutes, minus 2 or 2. So here's a gene therapy timeline. I couldn't find a good timeline on the internet, so I created one myself. You can look at this when you look at my slides. By the way, that drawing was drawn by a little girl who was one of the first successful gene therapy patients. I thought that was appropriate to include. And I already mentioned this. Let's talk about broad spectrum antivirals. If you haven't read about it, you should read about Draco, which is the first serious attempt to create a broad spectrum antiviral, which could treat up to 90% of all the diseases. It's based on some of the mechanical things that happens with any virus invading a cell to turn the cell into a virus-making factory. Regenerating organs, your favorite topic. This is Dr. Anthony Atala. I've known him for about a decade. They started out putting stem cells in Hewlett-Packard inkjet printers, spraying them on the scaffolds using an inkjet printer. Now they're using 3D printers, and they're using more complex organs. They've done bladders and vessels, and now they're working on all the other organs, and they're taking the organs and depopulating the cells and repopulating them with stem cells, and that's his current approach. Bionic exoskeleton. Well, I'm just going to say that a lot of innovations come from science fiction. There's Mickey Rourke wearing an exoskeleton. There are the real exoskeletons from Lockheed Martin, and another one used to help a paraplegic lady walk. So this is where science fiction works. If you want to see science fiction examples, if you want some great ideas for if you guys give a talk sometime, go to technology.com, which is listed here. It's called technology.com. They have 2,000 examples of things that were shown first in science fiction and are now actually happening, including all the Star Trek stuff. This is the first carbon nanotube boat. It's not nanotube, it's nanotube. That's a mnemonic slip because my wife's name is Nan. So the first carbon nanotube boat is called the Piranha. It goes 25,000 miles. Actually, it doesn't go 3,000 miles, it's 25,000 miles. And it's the first carbon nanotube boat. And I promised in my, the title of my talk includes GEX-skin. So here's GEX-skin. Some people at UMass Amherst studied, biomimetics is a big deal, right? So we study what nature invented first because we don't have to reinvent it. So nature invented a way for a lizard to stick to a smooth pane of glass, and how do they do it without leaving a residue or using glue or excretions? This is how a gecko does it. And they created that so that that television set is hanging from a little small piece of material which is glued to it using this GEX-skin. And it can hold up to 700 pounds attached to a smooth surface. So I would urge you to keep innovating, make bold choices, turn weak signals into radical innovations, and change the world if you can. And try your best and keep going. And that's my talk, and here are my references, and you can see my sites whenever you like. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One question, maybe? Everything is clear? Yeah.
Now we have to look at the man to reload it.